This is slated to be her Christmas present, which I am getting increasingly concerned about. Hi, hello, my name is Allie. I'm an independent graphic designer coming to you from just outside Toronto, and this is my channel where I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it is costing me. And today we're really going to be focused on a WIP update because this WIP has basically taken over my life. So that's basically all that I have to tell you about. I do also have a little bit though of a development of a future plan, sort of a progression of my winter knitting plans for my last video. Oh, before I forget though, one exciting thing we're doing today, we have a giveaway today. So stay tuned, I'll give you more info on that in a few minutes. Today I am wearing my No Frills cardigan from Petite Knit. So this is a pattern that fits up to a 59-inch bust, which like, we just a little more size inclusive I would love. But I finished this around the end of June, beginning of July. And so far I've logged 34 wears of this. So factoring out that it cost me $240 Canadian for materials and pattern costs to make in the first place. That puts our current cost per wear of this garment at $7.05 per wear. And honestly, I suspect it's actually a little bit lower than that because I do tend to just throw it on kind of around the house anytime I'm cold, and I don't think that I always remember to log it when I do that. So I think it's actually a little bit lower, but honestly 34 wears, given that I've only had this like 6 months, feels pretty good to me. I like this cardigan because I feel like it is really good for both dressing up or dressing down. Like I have both, like I said, used it all the time as almost like a house coat just around the house, regardless of what I'm putting it over top of. But I've also worn it out as like an outfit. Like I feel like it's a fun statement piece just because it is so like big and dramatic and colorful. So I really appreciate how versatile it is in that way. And I think that this one is going to end up with a really good cost per wear kind of over the scheme of its whole life, which I, hope is long. I'm also wearing layered underneath it. This is my Fausta bralette that I actually made into a full-length top. This is a pattern from Low Key Bold Knit. So it accommodates up to a 56-inch bust, but it does have a lot of very cool like customized sizing to like your cup size versus your underbust size. So I do wish that the size range was a bit bigger, but if you do fall within that range, it is an incredible pattern as far as like customization goes. I finished this one kind of around the tail end of summer / very beginning of fall, and all in it cost me $75. And this is my 5th time wearing it, which means that so far we're at a $15 cost per wear. So obviously this one is not going down as quickly as this one is, but I think that's to be expected. This is a sort of dressy camisole style top, so I think it's a bit more specific to like building an outfit around it. But at the same time, since discovering that I can wear it under my cloud bow and it works really nicely, I can pair it with cardigans and wear it in cooler weather. I am excited to kind of find different ways that I can wear this throughout the year. As for my mug and my tea today, this is actually one of my Frozen mugs because I also have the corresponding Elsa mug. And so these mugs, if you had a small child when the movie Frozen first came out, you probably know, and to be clear, I did not have a small child. I don't have any children now, but I was obsessed with the movie Frozen. But you will probably know that at the time that Frozen came out, there was a massive shortage on Frozen merch. Like they just really were not prepared for how successful the movie was gonna be and how much demand there was gonna be for merch. And there was just so little of it. At that time, I was in university and I was living 1 block away from the Eaton Centre, the big mall in Toronto, which is where the Disney store is. So I would go there all the time to like check up and see if there was any Frozen merch or what new things had popped in. And I just remember one day going in and finding this pair of mugs, and just the prospect of finding Frozen mugs was just like the greatest. And I remember nabbing them and them being sold out like the next day and me being like, yes. And out of my Anna mug today, I'm drinking the David's Tea Salted Caramel Oolong because it is December, which means that it is David's Tea Advent calendar season. So every day I get to try a fun new tea and it's really delightful. I actually haven't taken a sip of this yet. Oh, that's really good. I was worried that I had oversteeped it a little, and I probably did, but it still is like really good. Gabber, what are you doing? Why are you rummaging around? Okay, so before we get into the WIP update that's going to be the sort of meat of the video, let's talk giveaway as a way to sort of ring in the new year. And I think that the concept of New Year's resolutions is a very popular one. It's also a very contentious one. I feel like people have very strong opinions on New Year's resolutions, right? Like I think some people swear by them. I think some people hate them. And I'm really interested in how this idea kind of relates to our knitting. Like, are you someone who has goals related to your knitting, who wants to do something different in the new year related to your knitting? Whether you are someone who loves a New Year's resolution, or if you're like, no, I'm just gonna start it today. Why do I need this arbitrary date? I think that the prize for this giveaway could help you out. So enter Hooks and Needles. So Hooks and Needles is a crafting subscription box. They have a knitting version, they have a crochet version. And when I was talking with them about working with them on another video, they asked me if I would like them to send me another box. And I was like, actually, I think it would be fun if we save that box to give away for someone new to try. Because I think that is A, in the spirit of the holiday season, and B, so appropriate to the idea of the new year. If you're looking to expand your knitting skill set with maybe trying something that you haven't thought to try before or branching out into crochet, Hooks and Needles is such a good way to do that, because so not only do you get in your box, you get this little magazine that gives you different project ideas to choose from that you can make with the yarn that also comes in your box. There's 3 different balls in here in this box that I got. There are also notions like needles, all the tools you need to try out the new projects in this booklet, but they also have step-by-step video tutorials for their projects, and I think that it can be so much smoother and just more fun of an experience to learn when it's actually being shown to you carefully step by step, instead of you having to be trying to decipher sort of semi-cryptic written instructions of something that you're not familiar with. So if you'd like to sign yourself up for Hooks and Needles subscription, or maybe even gift one as a last minute option for the holidays, you can use code ALLIE20 at hooksandneedles.com for 20% off your first box. So if you would like to win a Hooks and Needles box to expand your knitting skill set, or maybe even branch into something else in the new year, all you need to do is be subscribed to this channel, follow me over on Instagram, and leave a comment on this video telling me, how do you feel about New Year's resolutions, especially as it pertains to your knitting? Do you have anything you want to do differently? Do you just hate resolutions? Let me know how you feel, and use the hashtag Hooks and Needles resolutions so I know that you want to be entered. And if your Instagram handle is not like obviously related to your YouTube one, please just drop your Instagram handle in your YouTube comment as well, just so I can connect the dots. And this can be shipped anywhere, so this giveaway is open to anyone who enters within the next week. So I will say the deadline for this is going to be like 11:59 p.m. on Friday, so that the winner is ready to go for the next time that I'm filming, and I will announce the winner of the Hooks and Needles box in my next video. So good luck to you. All right, so thank you to Hooks and Needles for sponsoring this portion of the video, and let's get into our whip update. All right, whip update. So I've been working on my sister's cardigan. Kim, if you're seeing this, please leave. And as we've discussed before, this is slated to be her Christmas present, which I am getting increasingly concerned about because we are getting increasingly close to Christmas and it's not finished. Now, I should note that I'm filming this on Sunday, December 15th. You're not going to see this until Saturday, the 21st. So rest assured, at least, that I actually have about 6 more days than it seems like I do when you're watching this and seeing where I'm at, but it's not as much time as I would like to feel like I have. So anyway, what am I making? I'm working on the Minu cardigan by Louise Rekhoff. So this pattern fits up to between a 58 and a 62 inch bust, just depending on how much of the recommended positive ease that you want. And I'm knitting the size 3. The pattern cost was $5.50 in euros, or about $10 Canadian. And I'm knitting this out of Cascade 220 Superwash in the color Deep Sea Coral. Now, to make this cardigan, I had to order 10 balls of that. And the place that I found that I could get that many all together to try to make sure it was the same dye lot and everything was from a yarn shop in Canada called Les Laines Biscotte. And that total yarn cost was $152 Canadian, which I think included a shipping cost. So all in with the pattern and the materials, this has cost me $163 Canadian, or about $119 US. So for the construction of this pattern, you start with knitting the back panel, and then you pick up and start the little front panels, join under the arms, and then you're knitting the sleeves in the round while you continue to work the body flat because it's a cardigan. And I cast this on October 25th, and I mean, it's going. Is it going as quickly as I would like it to? No, like these are intense cables, and it's taking time, friends. It's taking time. So the odds of my sister getting a complete cardigan for Christmas are dwindling by the day. I have been really like throwing myself into working on this. Like you will see at the end of the video, as far as an off the needle segment, like I do not have a reading update for you. I have not been reading. I do not have another crafting, like a scrapbooking update for you. I've not been doing that. Like my free time lately has been knitting this cardigan for like hours a day. So it is definitely paid off. There's definitely some visible progress since the last time that you saw it, but are we on track for Christmas? I don't think we are. So let's see what we can do. I now have multiple different balls of working yarn attached to this. So hang on, it's a bit of a tangle. Okay, so last time I showed it to you, I was working on the sleeves. I was working them in the round 2 at a time. And I had them down to, can you see this little stitch marker here? So I had worked them to this point. So since the last video, I have finished both of the sleeves, and I've also continued work on the body, which I'll show you more in a minute. But let's start with the sleeves. So around the time that I recorded my last video, I ran out of the balls of yarn that I was using for the sleeves. I was using a separate ball for each sleeve. So basically from where the sleeves are picked up to this point, that was 1 ball of yarn. Now remember, I'm using 10 balls for the whole project. So from there, I was like, okay, I don't have a ton left. Like I should be able to finish both sleeves with just 1 ball of yarn. And you know what, why don't I just knit those both from the same ball of yarn, just pulling 1 strand from the outside and 1 strand from the inside. Perfect, great, what a great idea. This was a terrible idea, and let me tell you why. So I'm knitting them 2 at a time on the same needles, and when you do that, it is important to, like, when you get to the point where you're kind of in the middle of the needles and you're switching from one edge of the first one to one edge of the other one, it's important that you make sure that you move your yarn over to be like on the right side of the project, so that when you circle back to it from the other side of the needles, the yarn is where you need it to be and it's not getting tangled like over or under the needles. And when you're using 2 separate balls, like one for each, it's not a big deal if once in a while you forget to do that, because you can just pass the ball of yarn through in between the 2 sleeves and untangle things. But when both of those ends are attached to the same ball, you can't really do that so easily, / at all. So as much as I mostly remember to move the yarn before moving over to the next one, I don't 100% of the time remember, which means that the further I got on that one ball of yarn to finish these 2 sleeves, the more of a disaster it became. The more yarn was tangling this way and that all around and in between. And I was having to kind of finagle it, like, oh, if I can just get a little bit more ease here, if I loosen this, then I can get more yarn to pull out of here. Oh, but if I do that, then it's tightening around the ball from this way. Like, it was a disaster. And I tried to power through. I was like, there's hairs all over this. I really have to defuzz this before I give this to my sister. I was like, I'm so close. I can power through and then I won't have to weave in extra ends, because that was kind of my whole motivation in doing it from one ball in the first place, was that I wouldn't be using 2 balls. Now I have 2 half-finished balls. So when I put them in the body, that's like twice as many ends. I really thought it made sense. It did not make sense. It was not worth it. And in fact, ended up creating more work for me, because when I eventually was like, I can't do this, it's too tangled to work with anymore, I had to cut the yarn and then rejoin those ends of yarn, and therefore create more ends for me to weave in at the end. I just said the word end so many times. But all of this to say that in the future, if I have one ball of yarn that I wish to work with for 2 different sleeves, maybe I only have one ball of yarn left, or I just, again, don't want to be splitting 2 brand new balls into 2 half-finished balls, what I will do, I will wind it into 2 separate balls, because that would have completely solved my problem. I would have used the same one ball of yarn, and I would have saved myself so much hassle. So let that be a lesson maybe to you via me. You're welcome. I don't know why I thought that would be a good idea. And like, how have I also not figured this out from times that I've knit socks 2 at a time? I probably did have the same problem and just chose to continue making my own life hard. I don't know, but never again. And actually from the stitch marker, which is roughly where I switched balls, I used almost exactly 1 ball of yarn to finish the rest of the sleeves. So each one is basically 1.5 balls of yarn. And these sleeves are fun because there's actually no decreasing on the sleeves. So they're nice and big. And then you just do 1 rapid decrease round and then do your cuff. So I like that in part because it gives some flexibility on the fit of the sleeve length, where like if these sleeves are a bit long on my sister, it's okay, because the cuff is so sort of cinched that it should really like sit on her hand, and any bulk will just kind of like fall to the wrist rather than it sort of falling down over her hand, because I just don't think the cuff is large enough to allow that to happen. So that gives us some wiggle room there, which is nice, because I don't really have the option to have her try this on without ruining things. So I finished those sleeves, and that meant that it was then time to go back to knitting the body flat. And I will say, I forgot to mention this in my last video. In my last one, I was at the point where I had been only knitting it flat, and then I had to start knitting it in the round for the sleeves. And I forgot to mention how much this messed with my brain. I almost had a meltdown trying to start the sleeves, because the pattern doesn't explicitly walk you through how to switch your stitch pattern from flat and in the round, because this is a, what is this? I believe a half fisherman's rib. And then of course you have all the cabling going, but I'm not super familiar with half fisherman's rib. I haven't done it a lot. Have I done it ever? Have I done it only flat or only in the round? I don't even remember, but you know, it's not stockinette. You're doing different things on different stitches. There are slip stitches. The pattern also specifies there are a couple different ways of doing a half fisherman's rib. And what seems to me from YouTube tutorials to be the most common is you are knitting into a stitch below on certain stitches. But this pattern uses an alternative method where you're actually using yarn overs instead of knitting one below, which is great, perfect. So I followed those instructions when I was knitting flat. But then when it came to knitting in the round, I couldn't figure out how to adjust the stitch pattern, like to do what I had been doing flat in the round. I was just like really struggling to compute it. And so I was looking for YouTube tutorials and I just could not find tutorials that were showing how to do half fisherman's rib in the round using yarn overs. They were all just like the knit one below technique. And I was afraid that if I switched techniques that maybe it would look different, like just a little, just like tension wise, you know, like I know fundamentally it's the same stitch, but tension makes a big difference in knitting. And so I was worried that it would look funny. So I really wanted to figure out how to do it the same way. And eventually I did. I just returned to kind of the pattern's original instructions for how to do the half fisherman's rib with the yarn over. And like I had revisited it first when I was trying to figure this out. And I looked at it and sort of wrote it off like, well, these are the instructions for how I did it flat. And it obviously changes in the round because you're not working the wrong side with the pearls and the knit, like things move around, right? But after then scouring YouTube tutorials and finding nothing, I went back and was looking at it again and was like, is there any way this still makes sense? And in fact, the written instructions for the half fisherman's rib in the pattern, they are true and they are accurate regardless of whether you're flat or in the round. It just kind of acts different, which I find it's really hard for me to explain without sharing things in the pattern that I probably am not supposed to share because it's a paid pattern. But just because of the yarn over, you know how depending on like what kind of stitch you just did and what kind of stitch you're about to do, yarn overs can be like bigger or smaller, just the amount of yarn and how far it's physically traveling around the needle. So that is very much the case here. Just the nature of your yarn over feels very different when you're doing the stitch pattern flat versus in the round. And because you're kind of slipping something different, and of course it's still all corresponding to the chart in terms of what ultimately is a knit and what ultimately is a purl, but you're working on the wrong side, so you're slipping something different, and there's just the confusion of knits and purls and trying to track it on your chart, but you're actually doing the opposite of what your chart says when you're working the wrong side, but you're not doing that when it's in the round. So it really like broke my brain for probably a good hour, and then I eventually figured it out. So I just really would have benefited from the pattern just like acknowledging, hey, in the round, these instructions as written are still completely true and accurate. It's just going to seem very different when you're doing it because the yarn over is going to be very different and you're going to be slipping this thing instead of that thing, which is what the chart tells you. That is what, like if you're looking at the chart, it all makes sense toward what you're trying to do. It just is going to feel weird and backwards. And this is how it works. I think could have saved me some time and some headache. So last time I did not have very much body below the arms. I basically joined for the arms and then just knit until I ran out of at that point, I think that was my second ball of yarn. And as soon as I ran out of that ball, I started the sleeves. So I was kind of just barely past the sleeves. And in that time, I have now knit this length of body. So we have like several inches here. I think that's 2 full repeats of the pattern, which is actually most of the garment length. Let me see if I can hold this up in a way that you can see. So I think I'm actually only supposed to knit like a half of a repeat more, but I feel like I'm not sure that that's going to be enough. I might end up doing 3 or even 3.5, but there is ribbing at the bottom. So I am continuing to try this on as I go, and I will see what seems like it makes sense. But do you see why I am concerned about running out of time? Because also on the sleeve, I think I ended up doing an extra half or even maybe full repeat on the sleeve because I was finding that they were coming out a little bit shorter than anticipated. And I think, actually I know that part of that is because I did decide to, because this is superwash, wash it and then actually put it in the dryer on high. It was really important to me that this could survive whatever anyone threw at it because I didn't want this to be a thing that my sister had to be like super duper precious about and therefore kind of scared to wear. And I did find that when I did that, I did lose a bit of length. I think I lost like 1/2 inch to 1 inch of the sleeves. So despite the fact that it's superwash, if it grew at all in blocking, we lost that and then some from the dryer, but it's not felted. It's still very nice texture. It just like shrunk up a little bit from that, I think. So I had to do a little bit of extra length on the sleeves. So I expect that I will also have to do a bit of extra length on the body, which joy, goody. That's, you know what, when you're on a deadline, what would you love more than to find out that even the original project scope is insufficient and you actually need to do more than you ever thought you did. We love that. That's so great. So fun. So on that note, partly as, God, there's just so much hair, so much dog hair. Anyway, partly sort of in preparation for the idea that this will not actually be finished for Christmas, and partially as a yarn management technique to allow me to use up as much of the yarn for this as possible, just make it as long as I can with the materials that I have. I've decided to go ahead and start the button band. So as far as it not being ready in time, potentially front, I'm thinking that if I'm going to give my sister an incomplete cardigan for Christmas, which I do think it will be funny if she pulls it out of the box and it's still like on the needles with the ball of yarn attached. That's hilarious. If that's going to be the case, I would still like it to be very clear what it's going to look like when it's finished and that it's just a little bit short. But that means that I don't want to give it to her like open, unfinished neck without the button band. You know, I think that the button band does so much to finish it and allow you to actually understand what this will look like, and will just make such a difference between being like, oh, here's something in progress, I don't know, hopefully it's nice when it's done, to like, oh no, I understand exactly what this is and it's just gonna get longer, right? So I decided I wanted to go ahead and start that, but tricky complication here is that the way that the button band is written in the pattern, so for context, it's a double knit button band. So it's not one that you could just knit at the same time as the rest of it. Like my No Frills cardigan, actually, this ribbing is knit at the same time as everything else. It's just like the last like 13 or whatever stitches of the row, you're alternating knits and purls. But because this is double knit, I don't think that's possible to do, not to my knowledge anyway. So the pattern tells you once you've knit the full body of your cardigan, then you're gonna pick up from one corner and like work your way all the way around doing your double knit button band, which is great and lovely if you're planning to finish the entire body before you start your button band. But to me, I'm like, A, that doesn't help me present this as nicely as possible if it's unfinished, and B, really requires very precise yarn management if I want to maximize the length of the cardigan without running out of yarn. That's tricky. So I decided that I needed to figure out how to do this button band in a different way where I could pick up stitches as I went rather than picking up all the way around and doing the whole button band. So here at the center back of the neck, you can see I cast on my stitches with a Judy's Magic cast on. So that's the one that allows you to like basically create two sets of stitches that are going in opposite directions. So basically I just took the number of stitches that you're told to do for the button band and I doubled it, because with Judy's Magic cast on, you want to cast on twice as many stitches as the number you actually want, because half are going to end up going this way and half are going that way. So I did that, and then I was also referencing aka Nora Knits did a tutorial video about how she was doing a double knit button band picked up as she went on her sand cardigan, and I kind of used a combination of what she's saying in that video and what someone said in her comments and what the pattern for this sweater says, and then also just my own trial and error to come up with the method that worked for me for this. So first of all, before I started, because this is in part about yarn management, I weighed the ball of yarn. I started this section with a new ball of yarn and I weighed it so that I will then be able to calculate kind of how much yarn did this use, like per row, per inch, whatever unit I want to use, so that I know when I get caught up to how long the body is, as the body gets longer, I'll know how much yarn I need to reserve to do the button band to go with it. So that was step one. And then in terms of my sort of makeshifting method, so Nora's tutorial specifies using an odd number of stitches, but my pattern instructions were asking for an even number of stitches. Now I definitely could have just modified this, but then just looking at the way that my pattern had written out the instructions for the double knit, as far as like the slipping stitches and the knitting stitches, those instructions were just clearly written to work with even numbers rather than odd numbers. So I was like, that's fine. I will just use the even numbers. So I decided to just go with the actual number in the pattern. And it meant that when I was watching Nora's tutorial, I was just sort of modifying a little, like, okay, she's going to start and end on the same type of stitch, and I'm not. Like, I'm gonna start with a slip and end on a knit, or vice versa. And then another thing that I changed from Nora's video, in her video, she has you do a yarn over before you pick up the stitch from the body, like where you're joining them. And I was watching that wondering what the purpose of that was. And then I was looking in the comments and someone had asked this exact question, makes sense. And someone else had responded to them saying, oh, it just creates kind of this like decorative vertical ridge. And I was kind of struggling to like understand what they, like I was looking at Nora's and I was like, I don't know if I understand which part is that, what they're talking about. But so I just kind of tried doing it without, because I was like, frankly, at this point, like any step I can save myself, I would appreciate. So I was just trying doing it without the yarn over and it worked fine. So I decided to just omit the yarn over. And the instructions in this pattern didn't say anything about a yarn over. Granted, it's using a different method because it's having you pick up all of the stitches in advance. So maybe that would account for a difference. I'm not well enough versed in these things to know. But what I did use from Nora's and change from the pattern is that the pattern has you joining the button band to the body using a knit two together technique, whereas Nora's has you actually like binding off a stitch. Like you're slipping the last one from the button band, you are picking up the stitch from the body, and then you are casting off that slip stitch over the picked up one in the body. This, just go watch her video if you actually need to figure this out. I'm not going to do a good job explaining it here, but suffice to say, this was sort of spliced together from various different sources. And I did find, because I did try in a couple spots doing the knit two together, and I did find that in this case of picking up as I went, at least in this garment, I found that doing the cast off method looked a little bit tidier. Now, I will say that I don't remember what Nora's tutorial said about this or if she specified, but in the pattern, it specifies that because with the double knit, like you're knitting it front and back, doing your like slips and knits, but it specifies that it's on the right side that is when you're coming back and like joining it with the body, and therefore that's when you're doing this either knit two together or a bind off. And let me show you. So this is my center cast on, and you see this like ridge here of stitches that's sort of like, it doesn't look quite the same as the rest of the button band, but it also doesn't look like the body. It's just this very clear ridge that delineates it. And I was like, okay, like that doesn't look terrible, but I don't love it. But then when I flipped it around and looked at the wrong side, I was like, why does the wrong side of this project look so perfect and beautiful? Why is that like a completely perfect button band with like no awkward delineation whatsoever? So I decided at that point, I wanted to pick up the other side of the magic cast on and start going the other way, just to make sure that I understood how to do that and that I could make it work on the other side doing the same thing, just because I'm not very experienced in this and I didn't want to like do half of the button band and realize that there was like a fatal flaw in my methodology. And I decided, you know what, when I do that, let me do that right now and let me try doing that join on the wrong side instead of the right side. And voila, like a perfectly beautiful, no awkward ridge down the side button band, because all of that ridge junk is on the inside, the wrong side of the sweater. So I don't know if that's just something weird that I'm doing, if that shouldn't be there when you do this on the right side, but is for some reason on mine, because when I look at the pattern photos, I don't see anything like that. The button band looks very clean, like it's just sitting nicely beside the rest of the stitch pattern. But that is what I found on mine. So I just flipped it. And there was a bit, I will say, in just getting this started, there was a bit of a brain break in trying to understand, okay, how many stitches do I put on here? Okay, yes, I have to double the number of stitches because half are going one way, half are going the other. Okay, right side, wrong side. Okay, when is it that I join it? Like, there was some trial and error. I did spend probably about an hour kind of like starting it a few different times and not getting past like the first or second or third step before being like, oh, I see now, like I misunderstood something. Let me go back and do it again. So do not be under the impression that I just magically figured all this out immediately. There was a lot of trial and error that went into this. And I am thinking that I probably am going to rip back this where I started initially and ended up with that little ridge before I decided to switch directions and try something else. I think I will probably rip that back just so I can get rid of that. But it is the back of the neck, so we'll see if I get lazy and decide to just leave that there. But so if you're finding that you're getting a weird ridge on the right side of your work but not the wrong side, maybe just flip it. Maybe just turn your work over and work the front as if it's the back. It worked for me. I am also, you can see I have stitch stoppers on this needle, and that is in part, on this end, it's actually, whoops, oh no. And it just rolled under my piano. That's fantastic. But so on this end, this one is here to actually prevent the stitches from falling off while the project is just like in storage. But I have actually been working on it with foam stitch stoppers because I removed the cord. These are my interchangeable circulars. I removed the cord because I found it was just like flopping I was always like trying to get it out of the way. And I wasn't using it, right? Because like you're working with so few stitches at a time that it was a nuisance. But when I removed them, I found that when I hold my needles, the little bit of extra metal that then hangs onto the cord does kind of rest on my hand in like kind of a critical way that helps me feel like in control and just be holding it comfortably. And I was really missing that without it, and just finding that this end of this was just kind of like digging awkwardly into my hand. So I just tried putting foam stitch stoppers at the ends, and I do feel like it's definitely still a bit more awkward than having that little bit of extra length from the circular, but it's a lot more comfortable than when it wasn't there. So I've been doing that. It's been helping make the button band a bit of a more comfortable experience. I do think that this is the case where just having a pair of like regular like straight knitting needles might be helpful. And I should maybe actually check my stash, because I have a bunch of like random straight needles from Grams that she gave me when I started knitting, and there's a decent chance I have this size in there somewhere. So maybe I should look into that. So you can see I've done the button band. This is the center of the neck. I've done it kind of most of the way down the V-neck, and I am almost to, let's see, this stitch stopper is where it basically starts knitting straight down, like the V-neck is finished at that point. So I'm almost there, and my hope is to basically finish this whole side and then potentially redo the start of this side and then do all down that side so it's caught up to the body. And then from there, I will just keep knitting as far as I can until Christmas, but it will mean that it has a nice finished effect for the top of the garment. I will weave in all of the ends except for the ball that's still actively attached to it. And that will mean that when my sister receives it, even if it's not completely finished, it will still look polished. It will still be very obvious what it will look like, how it will fit, right? The neck won't be weirdly open because it's missing a neckband. It'll be very easy for her to try on and understand what she's receiving, even if she will receive it back more finished in like a month. So still hoping for Christmas. You know, I am still spending a ton of time working on this, but I'm just trying to keep my expectations reasonable and like this it's not that serious, right? Like I'm knitting this for my sister for Christmas. It's not the end of the world. No one will die. My best friend is an ER nurse, and I think about this all the time in my work and other things in my life. Like, if this doesn't happen, is someone gonna die? No, I am not Brooke. That is not the stakes of my problems. It's fine. So that's my plan. Finish the button band, then keep working the body, weave in all the ends so it looks nice and polished. Maybe even sew in a tag if I'm feeling ambitious. And yeah, so let's try this on so we can get a better sense of where this actually is. Ow, there's a needle like stabbing me in the neck. Come on. There's so many needles attached to this right now. It's kind of ridiculous. Where is this strand going? Okay, so there's kind of strings going everywhere, but you know what? From here, it looks great. From here, it could almost masquerade as a finished cardigan, minus the fact that there's a button band on one side, but not the other. But look at that. Doesn't that look so, let me get my hair out of the way. I love this button band. This is my first time doing a double knit button band, and I feel like it just is like so nice and polished and just like, look at that. So this side will have that eventually, and just see how much of it, like if we just hide this for a sec, just like only look at this side, like that, even if the bottom is unfinished, like you understand what that's gonna look like and how that's gonna fit, right? This side is more of a mystery, right? Like it's kind of like, it's very open, it sits wider than a cardigan normally would. Like, why is my neck kind of chilly? So I think that the button band really does a lot for helping you to understand the fit, really seeing the finished vision, even when it's not totally finished. And you can also see here how the sleeve cuffs are nice and sort of, they're not tight, they're not at all uncomfortable. There's no, like I can open my hand quite a bit before I hit any kind of tension, but they are nicely cinched. So they really do kind of like sit comfortably at the wrist, and any extra bulk just kind of bunches up there if there's any extra length. Now, let's get up. Now, this is where it leaves a little more to be desired, right? Because I desire many more inches here. I desire many more inches down here. Obviously this whole button band. We are not even at the top of my high-waisted jeans. So we have some work to do. And in fact, we have some yarn to knit with still, because this is, what is this? I have one ball attached for the button band. I have one ball attached for the body. And I believe I still have 2 balls I haven't yet touched. So we have a lot of yarn. I'm probably like maybe 2/3, like 66% done. You know, I've used up 6 whole balls, 6 of 10, so that's 60%. And then I've used some of each of the 2 that are currently on the go. That's a lot of yarn. That's a lot of sweaters still missing, but I would love to finish it for Christmas. We're gonna try. If it doesn't happen though, I think that as long as the top part is polished, as long as this looks like something, I think we'll be good. I think that'll be good to wrap up, and I will feel okay about that. Look how cute it is. I feel like trying this on is making me more excited about this. Isn't it cute? Okay, now I do actually have an update on one of my winter knitting plans. So I've been talking about trying to figure out what to do with this yarn that I picked up in Vancouver. This is my Shelterwood Fiber Co. DK weight 100% Romney wool in the color natural dark gray / brown. And I listed off like 6 different projects that I was debating making with it. And I'd said that this one, the Serendipity, is my favorite, but that I was really struggling to figure out which colors to combine and kind of how to use this very multicolor colorwork situation with this in a way that I would like. And I mentioned that I had this idea of using the La Bien-Aimée Inco colorway that I thought that, as much as I don't love how it knits up just in flat stockinette on its own, that I do think that I might really love how it looks as little like peaks in a colorwork project. But that just as I kind of got attached to this idea, I found, oh my God, I can't get this anywhere that's not costing me like 36 euros in shipping, because it doesn't seem to be widely stocked. Like I can't find somewhere I can order this in the Merino DK base that isn't like direct from La Bien-Aimée itself. Thankfully, I had a viewer, Claire, thank you so much, Claire, tell me that it was actually available on Wool & Co, which I am like 99% sure that I actually checked Wool & Co, but I guess that between the time that I was doing that and when Claire saw the video, they had added it, and it's not even one that they have in stock, but they can special order it. I think it was like 4 to 6 weeks to order it in, but I can order it from them, and it means that my shipping is $10 US instead of like 36 euros or whatever it was gonna be from La Bien-Aimée, which is much more reasonable. It's still very expensive yarn, but like that to me takes it from the category of like absolutely not to like, okay, you know what, it's worth it to me in this case. So I ordered one skein of the La Bien-Aimée Merino DK in the colorway Inco, and then I also ordered one in the colorway Winter to be just like a plain cream color. That's my second contrast color of the pattern, and my second and last, because this pattern is actually written to have 3 contrast colors, so 4 colors total. But I've been messing around with the chart, mocking up different ways to organize the colors, and created a version that's actually only 3 colors. And I would love to show you this chart and what I've changed, but I don't think I can really do that without showing you a chart that I shouldn't be showing you because it's part of a paid pattern. So maybe at some point I'll create like a very rough, just like illustrated version to show the differences that you couldn't use instead of buying the chart yourself. But today is not that day. We have a lot of work to do in the new cardigan. We are not drawing random doodles for this right now. But so my plan is now to use this Shelterwood Fiber Co yarn along with the Inco and the Winter to create a beautiful, fun 3-color stranded colorwork sweater. Will be my first time doing that. And I think it's gonna be a really fun, cute combo. So I'm very excited about that. I am less excited about the total cost of this sweater because let's break it down. So the Shelterwood Fiber Co yarn, I bought 4 skeins of this, and I got this from Bad Anna's in Vancouver, which cost me $117 Canadian. And then when I ordered from Wool & Co, to kind of make their flat rate shipping more worthwhile, they also had some other yarn that I have in mind for a future project, but we're not gonna get into that today. I'm gonna wait on that one until I actually have some yarn in front of me that I can show you, because it also is not related to winter knitting plans. It's gonna be more of a spring thing. But so I'm allocating half of the order shipping toward this project because half is for that. So $5 shipping plus 2 36 US dollar skeins of yarn means that at Wool & Co I spent $77 US or about $110 Canadian. So adding up those 2 different yarn purchases and also the pattern, that brings us to a total project cost of $235 Canadian or 165 US, which is not a small amount of money. So I really hope that I really love this sweater when it's finished, because I had better. I am also thinking, like looking at these numbers, I'm like, I probably should have just ordered a different yarn for the cream color DK. Like, I did not need to buy a 36 US dollar skein of that, probably. Like, I think that in the moment, I just kind of felt like, well, it'll be easier if it's the exact same yarn base and I don't have to worry about like one being like thicker than the other or whatever. And like, that's probably true to an extent, but I probably could have found one that would have worked just fine for significantly less. Like, to pay indie dyer prices on a yarn that's like basically just plain natural wool color, I don't think that was my best use of my yarn budget. So yeah, I could have saved a little money there, definitely. And I'm gonna say I don't think I would do that again. But you know what, I could also see in the future having a similar kind of like, I just want to get it ordered, I just want to know that it all works together, oh, let's just do it, I could see it happening again. But we're gonna aim not to, because I just don't feel like that's like the best use of my yarn budget, to buy like a standard solid from an indie dyer. But so to remind you kind of what the whole plan is for this, so this is going to be the Serendipity by Knitting for Breakfast. This is a top-down circular yoke colorwork sweater written to be knit on 4mm needles. So like, I will probably end up knitting it on like 4.25 or 4.5. This pattern is size inclusive up to between a 62 or a 66 inch bust, just depending on how much of the recommended positive ease that you want. And the pattern cost is 550 euros or about $8 Canadian. So once the menu cardigan is finished, it's going to be either the Serendipity or the Colette pullover that I was talking about in my winter knitting plans. So the order of operations here is a little bit up in the air, though I do feel like it's maybe skewing a little bit in the favor of this, just because my hands might be really ready for a break from cables. But I think it will also depend on just when does this yarn arrive, because like I said, they are special ordering it for me, so it's not gonna be here in a few days. So if I'm done the menu cardigan and it's not here yet, I will be starting the Colette just to have something to do. So we'll see what happens. All right, that's all I've got for you today. So don't forget, if you want to enter the Hooks and Needles giveaway, don't forget to leave your comment below with the hashtag Hooks and Needles resolution. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel, following me on Instagram at Allison Rowan, and do that before 11:59 p.m. on the Friday after this video is posted, so that in my next video I can announce the winner. So thank you so much for coming to knit with me today. If you'd like to be here next time, please consider subscribing if you're not already. But if you already are, you are my favorite. And I'll see you next time. Bye. Copper middle.